What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my build for the monk class, focusing on the Sensei archetype. This build actually took me a while to piece together because after doing a poll and sharing some classes that I actually don't like very much, I was essentially challenged by the community to come up with a build for the monk, which is, if you're unaware, a class I am not particularly fond of myself, though that said, it is of course a very popular class, and because of the nature of all this, I wanted to do something fairly unique, and after just kind of looking up my first initial ideas, it turns out most of those had already been done, so I kind of wanted to do something a little more unique, and I don't really see anybody messing around with this Sensei archetype much. So with that said, the actual goal of this build is to essentially provide buffs to our party, as well as acting as a sort of tank. Now, simply because of that, you might not want to play this class as your main character, but rather as a mercenary that you hire from the NPC who allows you to do that, Hylor. As it occurs to me, this build might not be the most fun to actually play as your main character, but overall, due to the nature of the buffs and things we're about to get into, they are very handy to have just as someone who can provide a lot of buffs and tank a ton of damage for you. So with that out of the way, let's actually dive into a couple things about the Sensei themselves. So for starters, they're going to lose a few things. They're going to lose the Flurry of Blows, which allows the monk to make a flurry of blows with their unarmed attacks. They're also going to lose the evasion that they would normally get at level 2, which is improved evasion, and then, of course, the improved variant at level 9. In addition to that, they're also going to lose 4 of their 6 monk bonus feats, the ones at 2, 6, 10, and 14. But what they get in return is quite a few things, actually. For starters, they get the Advice ability. Now, the Advice ability is literally just Bardic Performance, but for the monk, because the Sensei archetype can actually use 2 bard songs by themselves, Inspire Competence and Inspire Courage. The primary one that we are concerned with is Inspire Courage. This is going to give a morale bonus to saving throws against charm and fear effects, as well as a competence bonus on attack and weapon damage rolls, increasing as you level up to a maximum of +4 at 17th level. Now, the Sensei gets one other really cool ability that is different from the regular monks. That is the ability they get at 2nd level that actually allows them to use their Wisdom modifier for their attack rolls. Because if you're unaware, the monk themselves actually use their Wisdom stat quite a lot. It gives them extra AC if they're unarmored and unencumbered, as well as does a few other things for them. But this unique ability for the Sensei actually allows them to use Wisdom for their attack rolls as well, which is fairly handy because we're not going to be really putting anything into strength or much in the way of dex actually either. Because again, we're focused on just being a tank as well as buffing our party, not so much doing damage. Now that brings us to the other big ability for the Sensei, and that is Mystic Powers and Mystic Wisdom. Now, Mystic Powers, you'll first get it at 6th level. This is going to let you use your Advice ability when you spend points from your key pool, which is part of the monk class. But instead of just using your key powers on yourself, you can give your key powers to one ally within 30 feet rather than yourself. And then at 10th level, you can actually affect your entire party or all allies within 30 feet rather than yourself. Though, to be clear, on the 10th level stuff, you are also included in the all allies within 30 feet. Even though the wording is a little weird there. And then we have Mystic Wisdom. This is essentially the same thing as Mystic Powers, however it just grants a few extra abilities to actually grant to your party as well, but basically the same thing. So with some of that stuff out of the way, let's actually jump into character creation here and kind of walk you through what that's going to look like. Me personally, I prefer a human for this. You can use another race if you want to, however humans get an extra bonus feat at level 1, and combined with the monk bonus feat is going to allow us to take 3 feats at level 1, and considering the amount of feats we're going to have to pick up, this can greatly accelerate that. Though to be clear, you don't have to play a human, I just find it helpful. Now for our background selection, we're going to want to pick up the Acolyte background. This allows you to change your persuasion attempts from your charisma modifier to your wisdom modifier for your persuasion checks. Now again, you don't have to use this, and if you're not using this character as your main character, you might not even want to use them for persuasion, but given their naturally high wisdom, I feel like this background kind of makes sense, especially given the Sensei archetype. But the other thing that this is going to do is completely remove anything we need charisma for. So when it comes to allocating our ability scores, basically what we want here is just a couple of things. One, we need our dexterity to go to 13. That's it. That's all we're really going to raise it up for. You can go ahead and take it up to 14 if you want, just to get the +2 to the modifier. And then beyond that, we're going to dump everything else into wisdom and constitution. Now, we can dump all of our points out of charisma. We literally don't need charisma for anything. Now, if you use your racial bonus to your attributes for dexterity, you can raise that to 14 pretty easily, then take wisdom to 18 and then constitution to 16. That's personally how I like to split it, though feel free to kind of mix it around a little bit. Considering we only need 13 dex, you might consider spending your racial bonus on constitution, which will allow you to give yourself 18 constitution and 18 wisdom, and a dex of 12, and then at level 4 you could just put 1 point into dex and you'd be good to go. So there's a few different ways to split it, but basically, wisdom as high as we can go. Dex, we're going to need a minimum of 13 at some point to pick up some of our feats, and the rest can go to constitution. For our skills, the things we're going to have the highest bonus for are lore nature, lore religion, perception, and persuasion. Now, I would recommend at some point putting at least 3 points into mobility, because we are going to be using the fighting defensively ability that every character gets, and we get extra dodge to our AC if we have at least 3 mobility. But beyond that, simply because we get the highest bonuses in persuasion, perception, lore religion, and lore nature, and we have 4 skill points, those are what I would recommend putting them in. Next up, for our feats. First up, we're going to pick up Blind Fight, just because that is a super handy first feat to get. For our second bonus feat as a human, we're going to pick up Lingering Performance. That is going to allow our bardic performances to continue even after we've stopped performing for 2 rounds. Now, this is important because there are status effects and things that can actually stop your bardic performance in combat, or you might just run out of uses and then it will continue for a couple more rounds. Generally speaking, just a pretty useful feat. And then for your monk bonus feat, you're going to want to pick up Crane Style. This basically makes fighting defensively more useful by taking half of the penalty on your attack rolls for using it away, and also granting us additional dodge bonus to our AC. Now the rest of character creation is all cosmetic stuff. From here, we're going to jump into the other feats I would recommend that you take. So at level 3, you're going to want to go ahead and pick up dodge because it is a prerequisite for several of our other feats. This is just going to give us a +1 dodge bonus to our AC. At level 5, we're going to pick up Crane Wing. This will cause us to, when fighting defensively, with at least one hand free, and we're going to be unarmed, to gain an additional +4 dodge bonus to our AC against melee attacks. But if that melee attack misses us by 4 or less, we lose the dodge bonus until the beginning of our next turn. Then at level 7, we're going to pick up Crane Riposte. This further reduces the penalty on fighting defensively down to just -1 instead of -4. And if we lose the dodge bonus from Crane Wing because we've been missed by an attack by 4 or less, we actually get to perform an attack of opportunity on that target as well. Now at level 9, I like to pick up Toughness. This just flat out gives us more hit points. At 11, we can pick up Combat Mobility, which allows us to get a +4 dodge bonus to our AC against attacks of opportunities when we're moving around the battlefield. 13, I personally like to pick up Deflect Arrows. This can just cause you to deflect a ranged attack once per turn. And then for 15 and 17, personally, I like to pick up Extra Performance, but you do not have to by any means. And then at level 18, you're actually going to get one of your monk bonus feats again, at which point I recommend you take Improved Blind Fight if you didn't take it in place of one of the extra performances. And then at your level 19 feat, I recommend picking up Greater Blind Fight. This allows us to ignore the mischance for things outside of total concealment, etc. And it's just super handy. Now, I do want to mention right here that the last 2 levels of our Sensei archetype aren't super important because we got our last monk bonus feat at 18, and the only thing we get at level 19 and 20 are abilities that really don't help us out at all. So if you wanted to dip 2 levels into something else, you could absolutely do that, no problem. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about equipment just a little bit. Equipment for this character is pretty straightforward, honestly. We're really just trying to build up that defensive stuff here. So we're going to want to use dexterity belts to give us AC to our dex, a wisdom headband to give us more wisdom, which will actually also give us more AC. Personally, I recommend a Mighty Fist amulet. Now you could use an amulet of natural armor to get more AC. However, one of our key powers is going to be Bark Skin, which gives us a natural armor enhancement bonus as well, which does not stack with natural armor necklaces. So I wouldn't recommend it. And then just Rings of Protection. And basically any other way you can stack AC is really the way to go, because again, what we're trying to do here is simply be a tank, while also providing buffs to the rest of the party. Now, before we jump into a little bit of combat, let's talk mythic abilities real quick. Just a few quick suggestions. In terms of abilities, I would recommend Last Stand, Leading Strike, and basically anything melee oriented that does not revolve around your strength modifier, because of course we don't have any. Feats, I would absolutely recommend Thundering Blows, because that will allow you to do damage to enemies even if you miss. And then the Toughness mythic feat is also very good, as it effectively doubles the hit points that you get from regular toughness, which will just give you a ton of health. Now, in terms of the actual Mythic Path, now if you are playing this as your main character, which is the only instance in which you would get a actual Mythic Path choice, I would recommend Aeon, simply because monks are a required lawful alignment class in order to continue to put levels in it, that is. And because of that, Aeon, in my opinion, is really the way to go, because they get a bunch of abilities that make them more tanky as well, which is kind of fitting for the sense of this build anyways. You could potentially get a few others to work, like say Angel, but again, my personal recommendation would be Aeon. That said, kind of do whatever you want on that regard. However, just remember that any mythic path that is not a lawful aligned mythic path is going to cause you problems, simply because alignments are a big deal with your mythic paths. Alright, so let's talk combat. Now, truthfully, because of the nature of this build, combat is very straightforward, as our damage isn't really insane, and the main thing we're doing in combat is providing bonuses through our Mystic Power and Wisdom, as well as activating our Inspire Courage Bard Song. Now, that said, there are 3 toggles you need to make sure you always have active. The first one is Defensive Spin. This is a style strike, technically, which is something a monk gets as they level up. There are 4 of them. You will eventually get all of them as you level up. But on the first choice, pick up Defensive Spin. The first one should be available at like level 5, I believe. And you want to pick up Defensive Spin right then, because it's going to give you a +4 dodge bonus to AC against any attacks made by the target of the style strike until the start of its next turn. This is a toggle. You don't have to do anything really, but just make sure it's on. It gives you extra AC against enemies. And then we also want to make sure that we have our Crane style toggled as well, in addition to our fighting defensively, because if we don't have those toggled, we're not getting the bonuses to our AC from all those things, and most all of our bonuses require us to be fighting defensively. Now, beyond that, combat is very straightforward. You're simply going to activate your bardic performances, or in this case, Inspire Courage, as Inspire Competence isn't going to be super useful, but Inspire Courage is fantastic for just getting extra rolls on our chance to hit. And then once that is done, we simply activate our appropriate key powers for our entire party, when that is available to us at level 10, mind you, which will then be able to give our party all sorts of buffs. In my opinion, one of the best ones is Bark Skin, because this actually increases beyond the normal +2 enhancement bonus. So at 12th level, we can actually provide our entire party an extra +5 to their natural armor, which is pretty big, actually. Then we can also use other key powers to make our entire party immune to diseases, immune to poisons, as well as grant them an extra 30 feet of move speed. So we can provide our entire party with some serious buffs. And then damage-wise, we'll be able to do a little bit, like on average, we're not really focusing in on the damage aspect of this. So each punch, you're looking at like maybe 15 to 20 damage, plus if you have the mythic feats I mentioned earlier, you're going to be able to push through some more damage from that. But again, damage isn't really the focus, so much it is just buffing our party to a ridiculous amount. All of the party buffs, combined with the fact that monks honestly just have a super easy time of getting ridiculous ACs due to things like unarmored, which allows a mage, for instance, to actually cast mage armor on the appropriate character, in this case our monk. Like literally with minimal effort, you can get your AC well above 40 or 50. And then if you're actually trying, you can get it well above 100 if you really want to go all out and stack all of the buffs. But the easily stacked AC, combined with the bardic performance of Inspire Courage, along with being able to grant our key powers to the entire party, just make this a very strong support build that can also act as your tank, due to their naturally easily to obtain high AC. Now that said, I do want to mention before I wrap this up, it can be a little slow going in the early parts of the game. Like on core difficulty, you should be good to go, but in the early parts of the game, that is Acts 1 and 2, most of what you're going to be doing is just kind of basic damage while acting as the tank, because you can get a pretty high AC at early levels even, thanks to all of the Crane style stuff and fighting defensively. But in those acts, your primary role is just the tank, because you don't actually get to start sharing your key powers with your entire party until level 10. But once you get to that point, you can make your entire party substantially stronger. Keep in mind, in Acts 1 and 2, you will actually be able to use the Bardic Performance Inspire Courage, so you will be able to buff your party a little bit, but the key power sharing part of it doesn't come on until about Act 3. Overall, just kind of a fun way to play a monk and support your entire party at the same time. A lot of builds like to use monks as a dip into something else, and I kind of wanted to see what I could do with putting most of our levels in monk that was also unique at the same time. There you go, guys. There's the build. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.